Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our preview series, the show in which we look ahead to the next Arsenal fixture. In this case, it's a teeny weeny little game called Arsenal against Manchester City. Arguably the biggest game I can remember in modern Arsenal history. And yes, I do count the FA Cup finals and Europa League finals in that. This is absolutely massive for Arsenal in the context of a potential Premier League title winning season. And we're going to discuss that and all the rest of it as well with, of course, our members from the Discord server. Let's introduce you to them now. First of all, it's Dan. How you doing, Dan? You good, you well?
I'm good, thank you. How you doing?
Yeah, good. We have to apologise, first of all, to our very keen live listeners who've been waiting patiently for us to sort out our technical glitches, but we've done it. We've managed to finish it. So, yeah, but you're all good, mate. You're all well.
I'm well, thank you.
Lovely stuff. Let's bring in our other two guests this evening as well, all the way over from Australia. It's Mike. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Tom. All's good here.
Yeah, joining us very late in the evening. What time will the game be for you tomorrow? I imagine it'll be like 4 a.m. Is it around that time?
Yes, it's around that time.
Are you going? What is the routine usually for these? Is it an all-nighter, an early alarm? How does it go?
Yeah, usually if it's a 4 a.m. one, then it's a grab a couple of hours kip.
And I tell you, it's commitment. It's commitment. I know a lot of our listeners do hark. Is it hark from? I swear that's the right word. Hail from. From's the word. Hail from Australia and Eastern Asia as well. So plenty of people commit to the same thing that you do, Mike. And it is, I remember the kind of the argument that goes around saying those fans that go to games have a greater or more valid opinion than those that don't. I'm sorry, but you guys have no idea the commitment these guys put in regards to watching games. So there we go. That's the biggest compliment you'll get from me today, Mike. Let's bring in our third and final guest as well. It's Kian, who has to travel probably about an hour for his to go to a game compared to Mike. So how you doing, Kian? You good, you well?
No better way to spend Valentine's Day, is it?
Indeed. Who else would rather spend Valentine's Day anywhere else but on the TGT preview show? Indeed. But no, we've Mike's obviously already had his. Kian was just telling us about his nice evening he's having. Dan, is there any plans for you, or is it an evening with the kids tonight?
No, not tonight. We're planning it for another day.
Yeah,
busy.
You, mate. Yeah, it's just one of those. I don't know if everyone buys into Valentine's Day. It's just kind of. It's one of those commercial things, isn't it? It's just an excuse to spend money. Speaking of spending money, Manchester City is the team that we're playing, of course, tomorrow. Dan, how are you feeling about this massive game?
You know what? I'm good. I'm actually in a good space. I know the last couple of weeks haven't been great in terms of our output, but that's been against teams with low blocks. City are going to come at us. It could prove to be the moment where we wake up. So hopefully something comes of them pressing forward, so we counter press and then we get something from it early on, because that's what we've been doing all season. First 10-15 minutes we've been hitting a goal in, and then the last few games it just hasn't been anything until maybe late second half.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the two games that we've had recently, it's mad to think like how different they are compared to this one. And it's weird also to think about them as maybe challenges that Arsenal have struggled to overcome. But Mike, this is a very different game for Arsenal because, as Dan's pointed out there, City are going to come out. They are going to attack us. There is going to be spaces that there perhaps wasn't in the last two fixtures. Is there an argument that maybe this presents a more assailable challenge in terms of the tactical side of the game than the previous two fixtures do?
It does. There's no doubt that our opposition over the last few games have learned originally from the Newcastle game that if you stifle and put 10 players behind the ball, then and you sit on Odegaard and you double up on both the wingers, then that's going to make it more difficult for us to play our natural game. And we've seen that from Everton. We saw that again at the weekend to some degree from Brentford. So the fact that we will have space, the fact that those players who have excelled during the year with that little bit of space, I think will help us heaps. And we've seen it already. We don't have to be scared of Manchester City in the FA Cup game. There was certainly not a full strength team, and yet we still arguably were extraordinarily competitive. And with the addition of the rest of the first 11, I think we'll take them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's the big discussions, obviously, and we'll come to talk about the lineups as well shortly, is around what changes we should make, if any, to the team. And, the games against Brentford and Everton have obviously given us a lot to think about, and we've struggled in those games. But Kian, do you expect a very different kind of Arsenal performance to what we've seen in the last couple of weeks or so?
No, not in the fact that we're going to do anything different with our play style or formation or players. I was hearing a lot of chatter about Nketiah, people thinking, oh, he's not good against low blocks, which I kind of agree. He's not amazing at linking play when the teams are sitting back. Jesus was extraordinary at that, and that's why we saw Martinelli and Xhaka have that amazing form at the beginning of the season. And you can see both of them at dip, not just one. I don't think people are mentioning Xhaka as much. I think he's going under the radar, but he's not having bad performances. He's just like leveling out and not having amazing performances. And I think that's mainly because of Jesus. We didn't notice that as much after the World Cup because we weren't playing teams with low blocks as often. We played United, and Nketiah played very well. He played very well, but the low blocks are getting us. And I think it's that left-hand side. I think teams were becoming predictable. That time when we had Saka attacking on one side under Emery and the early days of Arteta, I think that's what's happening at the moment against the low blocks. We're just ignoring our left side a bit more. And because Zinchenko comes in as well, there's no width going outside with Martinelli, and he's just isolated all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with Xhaka and with a lot of the team as well, actually, the idea of saying like they've had poor games is more so that they've just not been as good as they have this season. The poor, I think, takes things too far in regards to the actual performances of some of the players, because we've been so used to them arguably overperforming our expectations of them that when they drop to maybe what their normal or but just slightly below their normal levels, we perceive that as being, well, they had an awful game. But actually, in reality, they were kind of fine. They just weren't spectacular. And we need spectacular if we're going to win the league this season. You need that as much as you can throughout the season. Dan, obviously, there's all these mind games going on between the managers. Guardiola and Arteta continuously have had this dynamic between them. Arteta is forever asked about, going and trying to beat his former mentor. Guardiola's always asked about how is the guy he let go from Man City's getting on and now challenging him. What do you make of the dynamic and the narrative between the two managers?
I like it. I like the fact that Diet Pep is always in the shadows of Pep himself. But one day the tutor has to become, also the student has to become the master, doesn't he? So we're just hoping it's sooner rather than later. But I like the fact that he's learned under someone so prevalent in the game. He's got his own sort of style, even though it's very similar. I think Arteta's version of it is more coaching one-to-one as opposed to Pep's is the management overseeing everything. And it's nice to see what he's done in 3 years now? He's just hit 3 years, isn't he? 3 years of being our coach, then now manager, and what he's done with individual players and how he's improved them. Like we probably would never have seen this level of performance if we had continued under Emery. It probably would have been up and down consistently, but he's just been consistently getting better and better and better. So for me, it's a case of I'm looking forward to tomorrow's encounter. It's different to the FA Cup. This is going to be where the real money is going to be in terms of how they're going to be going out to win this game.
And I mean, one of the big talking points in Arteta's press conference, Mike, was the VAR, which we hope will not play a big part in tomorrow's game. We hope that the game can be played out without having to need the use of it. But he spoke very strongly. I'll read you the quote for those that haven't heard it yet. He says, "We ended the game after analysing all the evidence that we've had with the images with a huge amount of anger and disappointment, because that wasn't a human error. That was a big not conceiving and understanding your job, and that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. That cost Arsenal 2 points, and that's not going to be restored. We're going to have to find those 2 points somewhere in the league. At the same time, we appreciate the apology and the explanations, and we got a lot of sympathy from colleagues in the industry and in football who say that we cannot play the game with the integrity like we do, and that's it. We have to move on, and that has certainly made the players, staff, and our fans stronger and given them more desire to pass this hurdle than they put on us. So we're ready for it." Do you think that this is some kind of motivation that wasn't initially there going into this fixture with the VAR disgrace that we had?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that Arteta's got a history of trying to find things that are just going to give the guys a little bit of an extra tweak. The Tony tweet, etc. And so historically, he's looked for anything possible that's just going to give them a little bit of an extra kick. And I'm sure behind closed doors, he was quite vigorous in terms of saying VAR, no VAR. We didn't perform at a level which merited us walking away with the 3 points. And so obviously we're all more than a little frustrated because as champions elect, perhaps, if I dare call us that, we are. There's going to be games like that where we don't play at our best, but champions tend to be able to scrape results out like that, and that was a miss. But we need to put that aside and use it for power, use it for motivation, use it to kick Man City into touch, essentially. I think that's really what he's doing. But it's a hard one to take.
It is a hard one to take because, as Arteta put himself, you're not going to get those points back. You know, they've gone. And whoever, no matter what would have happened for the rest of the game, we don't know if we would have gone on to win the game from that point. Sure. That is the big talking point. You know, they still could have scored. So I was a little bit like, it's difficult to talk about it as a matter of fact, like we would have won, as you know, so sternly as Arteta did. I respect it because obviously he's got the faith in his players that they would have come through with the win still. But we ultimately don't know whether that was the case. So it's difficult to say that we are owed 2 more points in that same way because there was still a portion of the fixture to go on. But there's no doubt that the game could have played out very, very differently to what it did. And Kean, obviously, our history with Manchester City is not exactly great. I think we've lost the last 6 times we've faced them. And this time last year, or just slightly more than this time last year when we played them in January, that was a game that really felt like Arsenal, in a way, despite losing, announcing themselves because we competed with City. We beat them in the first half comfortably and went into that break knowing that we were on our way to a really kind of statement 3 points here. And then the kind of Arsenal of old came out with the penalty from Xhaka, of all people, and the red card for Gabriel, which was just kind of madness after he'd already got a yellow for dissent from the penalty. Martinelli missing that own goal just minutes after the red card had been handed out. You know, how do you measure Arsenal's change from just a year ago to now, and the difference do you see in the potential for these 2 fixtures?
I think you kind of nailed it in the question, is that we did get ridiculed a lot. You know, when we said that first half, though, when all the Arsenal fans were celebrating that, like, we did show improvement, but we did. And that would have been pointless if we didn't push on from them, but we did. As a team, we grew from it. You don't see Xhaka making mistakes this season. We never see him in fights a lot. And when you do, we just see someone pull him away straight away. So the team itself has learned, the team itself has grown. And we've seen it again in that cup match we played them recently. I didn't fear City. Like, they, as good as they are and the names they have on the bench, on the pitch, they don't play as that they don't have that authority in their play anymore. They don't have that fear factor when they're coming to your stadium anymore, for me at least, for this season. So I'm not too worried, and I feel like our players are more experienced, and I feel like our players are hungry. I see that in every game. It doesn't matter if we lose. You'd never see them throw their tools out. You seen a few years ago, players would put their head down. Xhaka was one of them. We had players that are gone now, but they would, like, our team just put their head down and gave up. We don't give up this season. We keep fighting at the end. So I don't feel like City would come over, and even if they win, I don't think it'll be like a convincing win that people are thinking it could be. And I feel like, and I don't even feel like they're going to win. I feel like we will get a result out of this game, especially at home because it's at Emirates.
I'm loving the optimism. Before we go to lineouts, we'll take a couple of comments from the chat box. Dan, Jason says, are you all worried that there's a few players struggling for a loss of form at the same time, like Martinelli, Ben White, Eddie, Partey, and maybe even Saliba?
I think it's more highlighted the fact that we're not starting the games as quickly as we was, because we was making little mistakes here and there in all the victories that we probably had in the past games. But now we're not scoring early on. It's like that pressure build up, and then you've got like the fact that everyone's watching, going, "Oh my God, you're making a mistake. We're going to lose." The Arsenal fan base are panicking a bit too much, but there is a loss of form across a couple of players. But I do think it's linked with the fact that we're just not starting as fast.
Yeah,
important as well. Like, you know, in stadiums, you feel it in the game now. You know, because we're at the business end of the season now, and from people being optimistic to jokingly saying we're going to win the league to people now actually believing it. So that adds the pressure within the fan base and in the stadium now. So when we're not scoring in the first half, everyone starts to be a little jittery and they're like, oh, okay, are we going to actually win this game? Because we know how important each 3 points are. But at the same time, we know we're not in the same thing as we were as Liverpool and City in the past few years. We're not that team. So the buffer was there for a reason because we knew we're going to have blips. This is still a young team. Even though they're mature, they are still going to have blips. So I feel like the buffer we built up, it was for this exact reason. We shouldn't panic.
Mike, a question from Afsar says, if we lose tomorrow, then is the title race over?
No. We're currently 3 points clear with the game in hand. That's top of the league, clear. Okay, it's not. We're not languishing in eighth. So we're top of the league. One game doesn't make a sort of champion or not champion. Or we would obviously like the points to give us a little space again, but absolutely not. Absolutely not Man City and not the Man City of last season. We're not the Arsenal of last season either, and that's the reality, and that's shown in the league. So absolutely not. The title race is on whether we win, lose, or draw tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And a one-word answer from everybody from this. Kian, I'll start with you. Dan Roberts says, if I offered you a draw right now, would you take it?
No.
Dan?
No.
Mike? Just thinking about it.
Come on, Mike.
No, I wouldn't. I'd take
It's
a
tough
draw
though,
the
because
Etihad.
if you take a draw, you're 3 points clear with a game in hand, which is at home to Everton. So you'd argue that we should be winning that game, and all of a sudden you're 6 points clear. If you lose,
I wouldn't be gutted. I wouldn't be gutted.
But it's
I agree. I wouldn't be gutted if we draw. I would be like, oh, that might be a bit of a missed opportunity. But losing this game is like, I can't even comprehend how I'd feel if we don't, if we are unable to avoid defeat in this. Yeah. But the chat box are very split in here. Steve says yes. Pinnyween says yes. Shameful One says no. Nav says no. Nav says we're better than City, and so that's why he's saying no. Rand says hell no. Amberlay says no, we want the win. Afsa says yes, I would take a draw right now. Jabu says no, we beat them and take the point away from them. We want the win, says MD. And a lot of people are trying to justify it as well. Steve says a draw is okay. The league will still be in our hands. It's worth saying that if we do, obviously, once this game is done, we have to play Chelsea at home, we have to play City away, and we have to play Liverpool away. We've played Spurs twice, we've played United twice. Of course, we have to go to Newcastle away as well. It's worth pointing out as well, who you have to say are up there with them. But you would look at the rest of our fixtures and say it looks quite good in terms of once we've got this game out of the way. And if you can get a win in it, it is massive for what Arsenal needs. And again, still, we've got a good run of home games coming up after we play Villa and Leicester away from home in the next two games after this one. Let's go to the lineups. Kian, we start with you. Talk us through your 11 and then explain your reasons why you've picked them with your star man.
No, I didn't really change it much. It's the default one we actually go with all season now, but I was considering it. I was thinking about where people said that we could take Trossard in for Nketiah. I hear people saying Martinelli's out of form, but I don't think he is. I feel like he's one of those players that can create something out of nothing. If you give him the ball on the wing, he might take on someone. Especially with the City, I don't even know if they will play Walker. If Pep was smart, he would. But I know he's playing those centre backs on the fullbacks. So I don't know if he's going to do that or not. But yeah, I would still keep Martinelli because he could still do something. But I feel like I kept Nketiah in eventually. It was because I think this isn't going to be a low block. So I feel like Nketiah can be dangerous with his pressing and his counter-attack. So I kept him in there. And then my star player, I did go with Odegaard because I feel like this game is just going to be like a ping-pong match. It's just going to be back and forth. Both teams are going to want to attack. Both have the same philosophy. And I feel like Odegaard is the one we need to get this game under control. We need control in this game. We need possession, like good passes in transition. I feel like Odegaard's the one that does that, and I feel like this is a really, really important game for him. I need him to show him that he's on the level of these De Bruyne and that type of players in this league, and I feel like this is the game to do it. And this is a perfect game for him. There is going to be space. City have Rodri as a sole CDM. Like, we're not playing against like Everton with like Decore and stuff like that, and 3 solid CDMs in there stopping him. So I feel like he's going to have the space. He's just going to have to be confident and show what he can do.
Absolutely. Dan, talk us through it.
Well, I've gone for the change in Trossard on for Martinelli, but it was more tactful. What Kian just said about Walker, if he starts, he's going to be trying to press high up the field. And I thought him and Martinelli in a constant race for the first half is just ridiculous. They'll just be running backwards and forwards. I thought maybe tactfully, if he put Trossard on a bit more inside, cutting in a bit more, helping link with Nketiah. When he brings Martinelli on in the second half, he's got a bit more legs. He could then take on Walker a bit more efficiently in later stage of the game. Hopefully that will then open up some space. So if we're going tactful and he maybe swaps Xhaka out, Trossard in, Martinelli out wide, I think it just helps us a bit. And with Trossard, I think wanting to win, wanting to sort of perform and show what he can do, I think this is the game. Especially, I think he had a good game against them earlier in the season as well. Like he's built for these games. I want Martinelli to shine just like he has been, but I think he will do a job coming on up front.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And lastly, Mike, with I say wholesale changes, it's just a couple, but they're interesting ones.
So essentially the back line is the standard back line. I think Ben White stepped up at the weekend. We saw him go outside Saka a few times, and he was actually quite effective there. Just didn't get the end result. The Zinchenko Tini debate, I don't think fits for this game. It might be something that if we a couple of goals up, we might do a switch later in the game. But the major change was really the Trossard for Eddie change. So this was based on, I agree with comments the other guys have made. I don't think Martinelli's been out of form per se. I think we're losing the synergy that we had earlier in the season, obviously, because Jesus isn't there. So, and we've got to be grateful for Eddie. I know I probably did a bit of Eddie bashing earlier in the year, like many people.
You weren't alone.
No, but we've got to be massively grateful. He's come in, he's exceeded expectations. He's done very well, but there is the lack of. It's difficult to describe the lack of fluidity in the top three, and I see Trossard being able to sort of swing onto the left while Martinelli goes into the middle, whereas Eddie's that fox in the box sits in a fairly sort of tight rectangle in the middle there. I think that front three will be more fluid. I think they'll drive City mad, and I think Trossard next to Martinelli will benefit Martinelli in the same way that Jesus does. So that was the thinking behind that. And then we've always got Eddie to come on. If that isn't working, we've always got Eddie to come on. So it's not as if this is the team for the 90. And I think it's. I know you referenced it, Tom, on the show today. Maybe it has been possibly a bit of a risk in terms of it's something new, but I'm not sure. I weighed that comment up when I was after I put it together, and thought, well, look, it's a risk. It's a risk either way, and that's a risk I could see working and worth a try, perhaps.
And Odegaard, of course.
Odegaard, I think this is his game. He'll step up. He's got a little bit of space, and when he's on fire, it lifts the whole team. And I think this is his game.
Yeah. I, like Dan, have gone for the switch on the left-hand side as well. I picked the picture of Eddie Nketiah pointing to his own name because I'm just so determined to see him be the star man. Mainly because I just think that there's been such a misconception around his last 2 games in an Arsenal shirt. He doesn't as Kian said earlier, it doesn't necessarily suit the low blocks. And I think we are restricted to the number of chances that we can create for him in those games. But it is just 3 league games ago when we played a more open side in Manchester United that he got 2 goals. And I think that same opportunity will come in this game for Eddie as well. Now, I have made the change for Trossard. I agree with Dan about Martinelli coming on in the second half. Martinelli came on against Man City in the second half at the Etihad and was brilliant in the same way that Trossard was brilliant by starting that game. And I just feel with the extra firepower of Saliba and Ødegaard and Zinchenko and Ben White coming into the team as well, like we didn't have when we went to the Etihad because we made those changes, I think that dynamic could work. That said, if I was a betting man, I'd bet on Martinelli starting this game. I think Arteta will still start Martinelli and Nketiah as the front 2 with Saka. That is what I expect to happen. I don't think he's going to make any changes at all to the starting lineup to the team that played. I've just written a piece on FL about the training video that's gone out on the Arsenal website. And if you haven't yet watched it, the clip that they show in the training video is a 5 versus 5 exercise of all the fringe players. So you got Tomiyasu, Turner, Mario Koja, Dubry, Roos Nelson. Trossard is in that video with those players. None of the starting players other than Ramsdale feature in that clip of the 5v5. Read into it what you will. It might mean nothing. But it is interesting that it's a video of the 5v5 of all the subs and that Trossard is the one that is indeed involved in that. And Martinelli is nowhere to be seen in that video. I don't think they're letting as very little out as possible ahead of this game. They very rarely like to do that. There's not been any training photos yet. I'm just doing a quick refresh on Getty to see if indeed they've uploaded any in the last half an hour, but they hadn't. No, there's still no update on the training pictures. So I assume they are probably not going to upload them unless they're really just before the game drops this time around because they're trying to keep everything hush hush. Okay, let's go to predictions then, and we'll start with Dan. Scoreline and scorers, please, fella.
I'm gonna go 2-1 us. Not an easy 2-1 either. I think it's gonna be a very cagey second half. All the goals are gonna fly in. I'm gonna go Trossard and I'm gonna go Saliba.
Nice. Mike.
2-1's my pick as well. It is. I can't see a romp, much as I would like to see one, but I think it's. I think it's a tight game, but I think we'll edge it, and I'm going for Ødegaard and Saka as our scorers.
Absolutely. Kian?
I'm going to go with the late smash and grab from Eddie in the second half, but the first goal is going to be by Saka. I think that's going to be a bit similar to United, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very tight game. And if Ben White scores, I'll uphold that bet we made. I'll give 10 something.
Lovely stuff. Yeah, indeed. If he scores, the memberships will be out. But no, it's I've gone for 3-1, mainly because on the Arsenal Lounge someone picked 2-1, so I couldn't go for the same scoreline, and I need to try and catch Mo. So I've gone with 3-1 as mine. I think 2-1 is probably a really fair prediction, to be honest. It's one of those where, like, it's probably safe to say they're going to get a goal at some point, but if we're going to win the game, we need to score more than them, so we're going to need the 2. But yeah, it could be a really interesting one. It could be like those classic games when we played against a Chelsea side that are like at the top of the league and we've somehow come out as 3-0 winners. You could see that kind of weirdly happening, but it also could be completely the opposite, where City have come to the Emirates and just bossed us before. It is an impossible game to call. On the lounge last night, Mo was saying about how actually both teams could cancel each other out and it just ended as a boring 0-0, which is also a very fair assumption that could happen as well, which would be awful considering the build-up. Maybe not so awful considering the ramifications of it, but we'll have to wait and see. Chatbox Dubbo says 2-1 Arsenal, Eddie and Ødegaard. Steve Stone says 2-2 for me, Saka and Ødegaard. Temi says 2-1 to the Arsenal. Amberly says reckon it might be another 3-2 win. Hope that you're right. Amira says nervy 2-1 Eddie and Trossard, but I'd happily take a 3-1 with a bonus Tommy Rocket because that's what we all deserve. Gary Griffin's going for a 2-2 draw, but I hope it's 2-1 to us. Jared says 3-1 win, Ødegaard, Partey, Zinchenko. MR Reaction says it's the fans backing the team that will get us that 3-2. John says 3-2 as well. Partey with a smasher. Trossard and Ødegaard on the score sheet as well. Jabu's going for a 3-1 Arsenal win. We will score with a corner. Eddie, Saka, and Martinelli. I wonder which one of them gets the goal from the corner. Maybe it's Martinelli from the corner. That would be pretty impressive. MD says 3-0, 2 from Eddie and 1 from Saka. I wish I had your confidence, MD. I really do. Byron says 2-1 to the Arsenal. Ed says 2-0 to the Arsenal as well. Ian says 1-0. Across the pond, Chris Moss says 2-1 or 3-1. He can't decide. He's cheating a little bit. We'll accept it. And Dan says, I'm going for a 3-2 win, Saka hat-trick. We'll throw up some more predictions as we round things off. I went for 3-1 scorers. Of course, Ben White screamer. Absolutely. Sticking with that all the way through the rest of the season and beyond if it doesn't happen. I'll go with Eddie Nketiah to get the other 2. Just to really rub the salt in the wounds of the doubters. That's what we want to see. Let's go to round things up. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. Much appreciate your time. As always, tell people they can find you.
Thanks for being patient. And yeah, so in the Discord, as always, supporting everyone. And then on Twitter, Alpha and Wolf. I'm getting more active on there, as I say, every single time. So it is picking up, but maybe in the next few weeks, you'll see me doing a FK and posting 50,000 tweets in a month, like, you know.
He does like to post that many tweets. FK does. You got to respect the hustle from FK, and subscribe to Latte Firm if you haven't done so already. Mike, thank you so much as well for your time, especially considering it's very early in the morning for yourself, and obviously we thank the missus for hopefully not going too hard on you for jumping out of bed at 2 a.m.
I'll pay for that one later.
Tell people where they can find you, mate.
I'm in the Discord channel, and that's where to find me, guys. And yeah, thanks, Tom, and the guys for sharing the screen.
Absolutely. Best of luck with the alarm tomorrow morning, and I hope that it's a welcoming start to the day. I really do. And lastly, Kean, thank you so much for your time, my friends. As always, great to see you jump on for another show. Tell people where they can find you.
No, it's lovely seeing everyone's beautiful faces on Valentine's Day. And no, you can't find me anywhere because I'm going into hiding if you lose. I'll be in depression. So
no, fair enough. I know a fair few people that might be doing the same. So yes, tomorrow is a massive, massive day in the context of not just this season, but probably in the modern history of the club. But not to undersell it in any way. But it does feel that massive. It's going to be incredibly stressful. Hopefully, it's incredibly rewarding. I'm not going. You'll be glad to know. So there's no bad omens going. But hopefully, we can put that to bed on Saturday. Sorry, against Villa. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate your time. If you could drop a like on the video, I really would appreciate that. If you would like to come on the preview shows and join up as a member, you just need to join up as a expert member or TGT ambassador, and you can join our Discord server, and that's how you get involved with the shows. And you can see these 3 fantastic lads in there as well. If you are indeed celebrating Valentine's tonight, have a fantastic evening. I hope you enjoy it, whatever you indeed are doing. Just don't tell me any details, please. I don't need that in my life. But thank you so much for listening. I'll see you very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.